škatlica. Dela? Smo live. Okay, so welcome to our first workshop session. As I mentioned during the lecture, the idea behind these workshop sessions is not to only have typical lab sessions where you come, like you did for the first half of the semester, where you had correcture. You did that, right? It's more of an idea of let's go through this together and let's discuss different ideas, different approaches during these sessions. And if you have any individual questions, we have 3 additional sessions for lab sessions each week. So you can always come and discuss it with me. But otherwise, let's go through this together so you'll know pretty well what you have to do each week and how to get to the final product, which is basically 100% of your final grade, right? So some of you don't know me because you weren't attending the lecture. My name is Mateusz Pesak. You can email me or write on the Discord channel if you have any additional questions or challenges. And today we have Amedea with us. She's an UX expert. And she'll lead us through this introductory session on how to make our own product, basically, because that's what we're doing. Has anyone read the description of this year's topic so far? Huh? No? Nobody? Okay. It's probably a good thing to do right now, because the idea is that through these workshop sessions, you'll be able to pursue your own ideas, maybe develop them, challenge them, and so on. Okay, so this year's topic is life in Ljubljana, or student life in general. So if you're coming from abroad, you might have a different aspect of what you're interested in or what your challenges are of living in this city, or maybe you have some other experience of living in your own cities, in your own countries. And we narrowly chose about 4 different topics about this. You can read about them on the description on Učilnica. The idea is you can make your own product, whatever it is. It's not really limited. So you can go into any kind of direction as long as it has some arguments behind why you're doing this, what the challenge is, what the target audience is, and so on. So if there are no questions with regards to that, we'll begin. All right? Yeah. Sorry, the first?
Where's the first task uploaded? Like this?
The description of the?
Description.
Should be online, like it was a previous week, maybe. Let's see. No, okay. Just a sec. Should be PC Projekto. Oh, sorry. There's only Slovene name for that. Okay, I'll change it. It's project description, but written in Slovene. But you have a description in Slovene and in English within that PDF.
Okay.
All right? Okay, great. So I'll just put my mic up. Okay.
Okay, will this work? Can you? Yeah? Okay. As Mateusz mentioned, my name is Amedea. I've been working in UX for 10+ years now. I have a UX school where I teach different kinds of things, some of the things that we will talk in these sessions. And I work at a company named Caldi, where we build custom development products, like more complex B2B kind of things. So these are supposed to be interactive things, not just me saying stuff to you. So if you at any point have any questions, notes, comments, if you don't agree with anything I say, please do interrupt. Let's have a discussions around these things. But yeah, as Mateusz mentioned, what we will do is go through a process of product development before any code is actually written. So you will do some research, you will get some insights, you will think about a solution, and you will build it in Figma and test it with people. So the main word in this sentence was actually people. We will make you go talk to people and then test with people, because we are building things for people. But before we start talking about solutions and all the research and everything, like we are talking about user experience. So first we need to establish what is a good user experience and what is a bad user experience. So I will ask you to give me an example of a good user experience. It can be an app, it can be a service, it can be a product, anything. I will wait until somebody speaks up. So.
Google Calendar.
Google Calendar, okay.
I use it and I'm like happy with it. It does what it should do, and like I know how to use it. It's like intuitive.
Okay. Perfect. Good example. Thank you. Another example. For sure, there are apps you think are great, and for sure, there are apps you think are shit. So.
I'd say Steam.
Steam.
Yes.
Okay.
Gaming platform.
Yeah.
They have a pretty good user interface.
They have a pretty good user interface. Okay. What does that mean?
Like you know where everything is,
Okay.
and it's like logically placed.
Okay. Anything else why you like it?
I'm used to it.
Fair enough. Okay, great. Give me an example of a shitty user experience.
The sign in for the bicycle, for the renting bikes here.
Okay.
The whole app. It was like so confusing. It didn't do, and then it just like when it did something wrong, it just said error and like didn't specify. It was just shit. It took like 4 hours.
Okay, not very informative. Okay, frustrating. Cool. Another example?
Windows.
Wi-
Windows still have
Thank you.
the control panel from Windows 7.
Okay.
They haven't updated it because there are a lot of options that are repeated, but they don't do the same. So.
Okay. Cool. Anyone else wants to share an example of a So what else would make a user experience bad?
If the app works slow.
If the app works slow, for sure. Anything else?
It's not connected logically.
It's not connected logically.
So,
It's hard to navigate.
let's say that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the most important things whenever we talk about good or bad experience. Like the main thing people say is like, I don't know where I am and I don't know how to get to a point where I'm supposed to go or where I want to go. So having too many options, which is many times having too many features, actually, finding our way around, onboarding, and not being able to onboard, that's frustrating. That's very frustrating. So one of the things why this is frustrating is also because we as humans have the need for control. And the point is for us to control the apps, not the apps control us. So one of the examples I have, so I've been a Mac user for a very long time, but I still remember the Windows prompts that would ask me questions or ask me to do stuff that I would not understand because I wasn't a developer. And it would be just like, it still is frustrating, and it's been 15 years ago. I still remember it. So what we're trying to do and how we plan for a good user experience is to make things logical, to put things where somebody would expect them to make it easy to get to where we need to go. Because the point is, we use apps to do something with them, even the ones that we use to kind of spend time on. So we need to make it easy for people. And also, we need to inform them what is happening to them. So there was an error that said nothing, right? How do I continue for that? How can I progress? And we expect many things from apps nowadays. And we expect the experience to be intuitive, which no one can really explain what it actually means, but kind of it makes you feel like you're in control. That's the basic need here. So of course, all of this is connected to what the goals are, what the motivation is by people for using the app, what do they need to do, how they expect it to go. It includes design, it includes code, it includes context, all of these things that need to be considered when we're talking about user experience. Because user experience is not just how the brand looks and how the screen looks. It's all of the things that happen also before. So today we'll talk about a few things. So the one is the actual design process. So what happens before we start writing code. The difference between discovery and implementation. And we're going to talk about interviews because that will be the first task you will be required to do after you decide which problem you will be solving. Okay, so I usually start with this slide, which shows how we think that companies innovate or build products in general. So we think that there are lots and lots of numbers and lots of thinking, and then somebody has an awesome idea, and then we think some more and we plan and we try to de-risk the situation. So we do lots and lots of preparations, and then we put things into implementation, and then there's the expected financial result or business result. The problem is that we think this is how companies innovate. Most companies still only do this part. So somebody somewhere has a great idea, who's either a founder or a boss or somebody who says, yes, I know this will work. People need this. And then we go and we build it. And this business result that we're expecting to come does not happen. And then we wonder why. And how companies really innovate is by following many steps before actually building things. So the first part is we do qualitative and quantitative research. So we actually look at data, we talk to people, we look at competition, we do different kinds of things to get information, and then we get lots of smaller insights. There isn't like this one big awesome idea that will solve everything, but there are small things. There are small ideas that we then take and put into the process of building. And we build smaller things, we build smaller prototypes from these smaller ideas, and in the process of that, we actually create something new. And this happens in two parts. First part is building the right thing. And this is the part that gets skipped the most. we don't know what we want to build. And it's really important to get this right, because if we're not building the right thing, we're building the wrong thing, which means we spend resources, and resources are scarce, always. Second part is then building it in the right way. So having a process where we build smaller things, which we can test, we put out, we get feedback, we refine, put out again, get feedback, and do this loop often. So from my experience, this building in the right way, we're getting better at that. Like companies are talking about Agile, they're talking about Scrum, we build things in sprints. We don't do releases after 12 months, we do them after a month. We get some feedback, so there's progress here, but building the right thing is still a challenge. And in the company I work for, we build for clients, so for people outside of the company. We don't do internal things. And whenever a client comes to us, they have this idea what they need, and they come with specs, like docs filled with features they need. And then we do this process, and we end up with something completely different. Because it's not the same thing what founders, especially if they are not product people or versed in this, think they need and what they actually need, and what the users need, and what the stakeholders and what the business needs. So, any question around this before we go on? Okay, so let's talk about the process, the design process. So this is a visualization done by Design Council from UK, and it shows what are the phases of designing a product. So we should start with a question, a vision, or plan, and the first phase is discovery. So I like this visualization because it shows what kind of thinking we need. And in this first phase, we need divergent thinking. So we're trying to open up, we're trying to get as many insights as possible, we're trying to get as much information as we can. Which means in that part, we talk to people, we look at competition, we do all kinds of different research methods to really generate as much information around the problem as possible. Then, when we have enough, we now need to kind of combine and make this information concise. So we go into convergence state. So we're trying to get all this that we found out and create from that, find a good enough opportunity, create a brief, what is required of the solution, and specify a challenge. So what we usually do in this point is where we usually start, right? Somebody has an idea, and then we go into development phase, and then we deliver it, and that's it. But we skip the first diamond, and we really shouldn't. So in the second part, again, we have then this opportunity or the challenge. We know about the problem, we know about the potential users, we know about the market, the things that we found out in the first two phases, and then we go into development. And this is not the code writing development, but developing of the concept, which means that we look at potential solutions and we try to build them into prototypes so we can test them. And the answer is never one solution. So we try to make many prototypes. We try to many different things, because contrary to what they taught us in schools, there is no right answer, and there especially isn't just one. So again, here we're going divergent. We're going divergent, so we're trying to look at many possible solutions, and in the process of building that solutions, testing them, getting feedback, we again converge, we define the one that's most likely to succeed, which we then end up in with a tested concept or working solution. And of course, we can add these diamonds on, they continue. And one of the things that I don't like about this visualization is that it looks like this process is linear. In practice, you might come in the project here or here, and you have to go back to the first one or the one in between. And these are all just things that should happen during digital product development, during the first phases, so before writing code. And sometimes it doesn't really matter in which precise order. This process is messy, but it's also a lot of fun. Why I also like this representation or this visualization is because we can also divide the spaces. So the first one is the problem space, because we're trying to learn about the problem that we will be solving. We're trying to learn about people who has the problem, we're trying to learn about the context. And then when we have all of this, we can go into the solution space. Why is that important? Because again, what we were taught is, and what was always supported, like at home, at the work place, is don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. And we are wired in a way that when somebody says this is a problem, we start thinking about what can be a solution. So if we don't kind of pull ourselves back and say, okay, we should learn more about the problem to really understand what's going on, to give ourselves this space to discover, we then end up right here and we start drawing and prototyping and thinking about and selling our solution and convincing the users that we're supposed to be interviewing and finding out what the problem is, how it works. We start telling them what they need. So this is something to be aware of, that through these first phases, we're trying to stay in the problem space. We are looking at the problem, not into the solutions. Like, we'll get there, you'll spend a lot of time there, but for now, we're talking about the problem. Why is that important? If we will understand the problem very well, our solutions will be better. And it's much easier and cheaper. And when I talk about costs, I don't only mean money, but resources in general, time, lost the list of resources, but people, frustrations, emotions, things like that. All of this costs us, and it's much cheaper to fix things during discovery than it is in production. Like, when we release things and we need to fix them in production, everything will be more expensive. It will cost us more as people involved and businesses. So discovery actually happens both when we are in the problem space and in the solution space. The difference is that in the problem space, this discovery is generative, which means that we are trying to learn as much as possible about this area that we are researching, while in solution space means that we are already building something, we are already working on something, so we have something to evaluate. We have something to test, to see if we're going into the right direction. So in solution space, we're assessing existing, while in problem space, we're looking for something new. We're looking for insight. It's messier, it's broader, and we're looking at what are the problems we might later solve. While in solution space, we're assessing how well is our solution working. And we'll talk about different methods, how to do that a little bit later. So if we're talking about the methods that we use in discovery, we divide them in quantitative and qualitative. Qualitative means people are involved, while quantitative, there's no direct contact with people. Some general distinctions are also that with quantitative, we are looking for patterns, while with qualitative, we're looking for insights. Sometimes we call it fuzzy data because it's not as specific as numbers, but that does not make them any less valuable. One of the good things for qualitative is that the needed sample is much lower than in quantitative, because in quantitative we're looking for patterns, which means we need lots and lots of users to actually get anything that is actionable for us. So anything that we can actually use. While in qualitative, 5 to 8 users per user group is quite enough. And there's this thing where we keep turning to numbers, like we are still in this world where we say, yeah, no, we're just going to release this, we're going to hook it up on analytics, and then we'll have 50 users, and we'll just look at analytics, and analytics will tell us everything. Analytics don't tell you much, especially since rarely it's set up properly, it's read properly, and it takes a lot of time to have a sample that is big enough to actually get anything out of it. It's better than nothing, but still, if you're building something from scratch, if you have a small user sample, go and talk to people who are potential users, talk to people who are actual users. You will learn much, much, much more than by looking at some numbers in analytics. So the different methods that we have is, so for qualitative, we do user interviews, which I'm a very big fan of, and not many people are, because for whatever reason, it's hard for us to talk to people. But it's the cheapest, the fastest, and the most efficient of everything else. We have, of course, stakeholder interviews, so people around the company that the projects or products that are built are relevant for, or have some kind of interest in observation. For example, I used to work at a company that did medical products, so we would actually go into primary physician's office and we would look at how their office was set up, we would look at how their workday goes, we would look what are the interactions between the doctor and the nurse, etc. And first we did it before having the products built, and then we did it again when our products were already used in the practice to see how these things changed and how they are used. Another option is user diaries. So if something is used continuously, for example, every day. So a friend of mine worked for Gorenje, and they did a user study on how people use fridges. So they would have people fill out a questionnaire every day, like what did they put in the fridge, make a photo of the fridge, and why did they do that, to uncover what are the pain points, what are the frustrations, what can be improved, what are options to make Gorenje fridges better. Concept validation. So once we start building something, we need to find if we're going into the right direction as soon as possible. So we don't put, I don't know, hours and hours and hours of design, make the prototypes really pretty and very fancy with all the animations. No, we try to make it as simple as possible. Sometimes even drawing something on paper makes it a little bit more tangible, and we can get better feedback. So what we're trying to do with everything is we're trying to get information back as soon as possible, so we kind of have this feeling if we're going into the right direction all the way. Then, of course, the usability testing actually the interfaces and how they work. And in quantitative market research, looking at competition, competitive analysis, analyzing the apps, the user base, things like that. Surveys are really tricky. They're really tricky to get right. It's something that I advise against doing, even though it's the most used and like the one research method everybody's comfortable with is, and when I say we'll do some research, everybody's like, oh, we'll do a survey. Nah. I'm going to tell you an example why surveys are difficult to do is because there's much evidence that people lie on surveys because we actually perceive ourselves as better than we actually are. So I'll give you an example. I'm a mom to a 5-year-old, and a few years back our kindergarten did a survey, which they did actually really well, on how we're satisfied with their service and they're taking care of our kids. And on one of the first pages, the question was, so how important is nutrition to you? And of course, I'm a good mom, right? It's very important, so I said 5. And then 2 pages later, there was a question, how happy are you with the menus in our kindergarten? And I realized that I've never, not once in a year and a half, looked at what their actual menu is. So one is behavior and one is what we think about ourselves. Does my behavior match the first thing? Is good nutrition really that important to me? Probably not, right? So surveys, really, if you want to do a survey, get an expert. And if you want to do a survey that gets you real insight, you need a very large sample. if you have 10 people that will answer the survey, it's much better to pick up the phone and do interview with 3 of them. Then we have desktop research, so any other kinds of research that we do on our computers or books or things like that. And then in the evaluative, quantitative are the A/B tests, which again only make sense if there are a lot of users. Then we have analytics, which should be set up as soon as possible, but again, need a big sample to have something actionable out of it. And all different kinds of screen recordings like Hotjar and other analytic tools. I promise in the next sessions I won't talk as much. So there's another thing that we have to do when we are trying to define if we're going into the right direction. Or there are different levels of validation. So the first level of validation is we need to validate the problem. What does that actually mean? When we assume there's a problem that needs solving, we need to go out and test if this is true. Many times it happens that somebody, again, has this great idea. We'll build the product that people need, but then we figure out that not really, like the problem was already solved. The solution is either too expensive or something. Like, we need to validate that the problem exists. And that actually happens more often than we would like. Second, validate the market, meaning there is enough people that would be interested in our solution, or the problem is big enough to make sense that we build something. Third, validate the product. That means when we have a concept of the solution, we go and test if we're going into the right direction. If our assumptions that this solution is good actually matches the expectations of the users and customers. And the fourth is we need to validate the willingness to pay. One thing is what we talk about in school or at university, and when we do voluntary projects and such. Something completely else is when we're trying to build something for the real world, when we're dealing with businesses. It's really important to test if people would pay for our solution as soon as possible. And this is not something that we do in the interviews, asking people, oh, so like in 5 months' time, this app will be built. Will you pay for it $6? Because they will, if they like you, they will probably say yes. In 5 months, you will be counting on all of those people that said they will buy, and none of them will buy. So what we do is we try to get them to commit as soon as possible, and we try to test. So you might have heard of the fake door experiments. Has anybody heard of that? The fake doors? That means it's not the best practice, to be honest, but the website promotes a product like it's already ready and gets you to commit, gets you to the page where you would pay, and then they tell you that they're not ready yet, but you could commit later on. So they don't actually take the money. But what they are doing with that is they test if there is enough people coming to that part, for the willing to pay part, that this actually makes sense investing time, effort, and other resources into. So whatever we can do for these four, like this is very important. If you have all of these four, there's a good chance your product will live. Of course, when product is live, other problems come in with raising the company and everything else, but that's a topic for another day. There's another fun thing around research is that we are biased, meaning our brains work in a way that we like to confirm what we already know. So there are about a gazillion different types of biases. One of the most known is the confirmation bias, which really is like, if I already think something, I will look for all the signs that prove to the same. So whatever I'm convinced of, I will look for those, and I will dismiss or even not see the ones that tell me something else. And this is something that we have to be really aware of, especially when we are in the problem space, and especially when we are the people that fit into the user group that we are solving the problem for. But I will talk about that a little bit later. So if we have an existing belief, and then we only collect evidence that support our existing belief, that will be great, because then we only get the check marks and everything's fine and we feel really nice. But the actual work goes on here, where we have to ask questions about the things we think we know, because we think we have hypotheses. Then we have to gather and analyze the evidence, and we need to test this. And this is something that goes on the whole time. So the whole time we're designing, building, releasing, maintaining a digital product, we're going through this circle of setting up hypotheses, thinking about what we think we know, designing tests to validate them or to see if what we think is really true, and then bring the feedback up and revise. So a few rules when we talk about product design. The first one is product designers usually put the user in the middle. It's usually us that are the defenders of the users in the business, so we always appreciate help from development that also thinks about what users want, not just what technology can do. And rule number 2 is that we as designers, as developers, as people in the product, or our bosses or our clients, are not actually the user. Even in your case, where you'll be solving problems for students in Ljubljana, make sure you are not designing for yourself. Because when we are designing for ourselves, sometimes we have problems that other people have too. But if we're only designing for ourselves, the solution will be for ourselves, not for 50,000 other people. So this is something that we're trying to avoid. So sometimes it's easier to solve problems that we don't have, because then we can get out of our confirmation bias, and it's easier to hear things that we don't think. Any questions up until here? Any comments? Something that you do not agree with, something that worries you, something that interests you. Okay. So we'll talk about user interviews because that's going to be your task. So once you decide in groups which of the 4 problems mentioned in the brief will you tackle, you will start doing interviews. You will prepare for interviews, you will do the interviews, you will write them down, you will get different insights, and only then you will start thinking about the solution. So what interview is, basically, like in its core, it's just talking to someone. Questions should start with who, what, where, how, and why, because we're also trying to make people think a little bit more, tell us as much as possible around this problem space that we are exploring. We are trying to get context out of it, so the circumstances. So what is the problem? Where does it happen? To whom does it happen? How are they involved? How do they solve it nowadays? How big is the problem? How painful? When is it really painful? And all things related to that. Because assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. So how do we actually prepare for the interviews? First, we write down assumptions. Why do we do that? Because we're trying to avoid the bias, right? We mentioned everybody has already some things that we think are true. And by writing down the assumptions, we're trying to look and form questions based on those assumptions to actually check if our assumptions are true. So what do I mean by assumptions is, for example, we are redesigning the app for Slovenian railways, and one of my assumptions is that most older people, I don't know, over 65, don't want an app to help them to buy tickets, for example. Or another assumption is if we put better notifications around delays in the app, people would be less frustrated. And with all of these, I can then form questions so I can actually see if what I was thinking was correct or not, and get some insights related to those assumptions. For example, another assumption would be rail travel is the best for families over 5 because something, and then I could actually design the questionnaire in terms that would test my assumptions and do it with people that actually fit the description. So this is something that you will also do. And then you will arrange the questions from broad to narrow. If we were researching public transport or railway apps, I wouldn't start with a question asking, what was your last railway experience, or when was what was the last time you, how did it look like the last time you rode on a train? I would ask, do you use public transport? Can you tell me how do you use public transport? Because I might find out that they use the bus because they had a really shitty experience with train 10 years ago. And if I started with the question, how often do you use the train? I would get, yeah, I don't. And then I would think that they are not viable for this. But if they had a bad experience, I would still inquire around, so why do they use the bus and not the train? How does it work? How often? In what circumstances and such? Because the problem that I'm solving is not build an app for Slovenian railways. That is not a problem, that's a solution. We're building an app, but what are the problems behind? Is the scheduling the problem? Is how I buy tickets the problem? Is like, we're also looking at why don't I ride the train more? And how can app help with this? So this is how you have to think about. Always go from the broader questions to the more specific. Another thing that has to be done is that after we define the questions and write them down, we test the questionnaire, which means that we actually make a list of questions and go and sit down with a friend and ask them all these questions, because just so it's not relevant, but we see what kind of answers we get. The thing is, we're not really good at posing questions, because I don't know how was at your school, but mostly it wasn't really, we weren't taught how to ask questions. We were taught how to give answers, because if you ask questions, you were the annoying one, both for the teacher and for the rest of the class. So we have to relearn that again. So it's good to test the questionnaire. We see what kind of answers we get. We upgrade the questionnaire, and then we are ready to schedule our interviews. When you'll be doing the interviews, the actual interviews with potential users, you will find out that some questions don't make sense, that some questions are missing. It's quite okay to change the questionnaire as you go, because with every interaction you learn something new. So how do we make great questions? First, aim to learn, not to confirm. So trying to avoid the confirmation bias, trying to avoid the selling of our solution, because there's definitely a solution already in our heads when we start. Know what you don't know. So basically, writing down assumptions to avoid this. Knowing your blind spots. We're looking for context. So the more we can find out around the problem, the better. We're trying to find out as much as possible of what goes on, where people experience this, how do they solve it, how happy are they with the current solution, etc. And we're looking for behavior. Remember the example from the surveys. So my behavior did not equal what I actually said. And we're looking for behavior, and that's why the good questions are things like, tell me about the worst experience, or tell me about your best experience. Tell me about your last experience and what happened there. Because from that, you can get the motivation, the values, what's important to people, what they actually think, what they feel, where is it painful, and things like that. And that's the that fuzziness that we are looking for. And it's important because there are the opportunities. So there where it hurts the most, where people are the most pissed, are usually the biggest opportunities. We have to understand what kind of solutions are people looking for, so we can design them in a way. And all of these we can actually get with interviews. When we try to do this right, we are looking for insights from three different sources. So to know that something is really true means that we can prove it from 3 different sources. So for example, with 3 different methods. So we hear it in the interview and we can observe it, and then analytics prove it in a way too. But that's very scientific approach, which rarely works in real life. But still, know the rules so you can break them. Okay. So I'm done with the slides. Any questions up until now about the interviews? Everything clear? Okay. There's a FigJam board. There's a link posted in Splitno Učilnica that has instructions for your first task. So in the group, you will decide what is the topic that you will explore. You will prepare the questions, you will write them down, you will create your own FigJam that you will share. So we can look at it, and you will write down questions. You will prepare questions for the interviews. Use the instructions here. So what you're trying to do is find out as much as possible about the student life, about a topic that you will choose. And then the next part is actually doing the interviews. So we expect for everybody to do 2 to 3 interviews per person. So if there's, 4 of you in the group, you need 8 to 12 interviews, including transcripts in your FigJam. Why are we doing the transcripts? Is because, again, because of the biases, we don't really we remember the things that confirm things we already know more than many things that we hear inside. So if you can record the interview, so you can go through it again and write it down. And we still have half an hour left. So you can start doing this right here, right now. So go into groups, start working on your questions. I'm here so I can already help you defining these questions. And yeah, I can answer some questions if now there are any regarding at least the work. So, everything clear? Do you know what you have to do? Is everybody in the group? You already know which groups you are in? Don't yet have the groups? You have the groups? Yes, yes, okay. Usually, if this was an actual workshop, I would put some elevator music on, so it wouldn't be as awkward with all the silence. But you can start talking in groups and start doing the work. So yeah, create your own FigJam. And if anybody needs anything, I'm here. I'll come and check on you.
Mute. Daš na mute? Si na mute? Je mutano. Ok. Nič nisem pritisnil.
Če ga ugasneš, si na mute.
Kjer gumb pa je?
Pokrsnil sem enkrat se tapkre.
Ja, nekje sem. Slikaš
Figma or somewhere?
Yeah, you can do it in Figma. Yeah.
But do we create?
Yeah, you can create your own project. You can have up to 3 pages, I think, like separate sub-projects for free. You don't need to buy it. And you can write it down in there because at the end, you'll just post the Figma link on Učilnica. So at the end, during your presentation, we'll go through your prototype and we'll see your progress through the same project.
So we are doing the page with something like this, but with questions?
Yeah, you can do this. Yeah, for this week you can do this, and then next week we'll slowly proceed towards the prototype, and we'll add on or change or maybe adjust a few things, even with the questionnaires.
Homework, we upload the link to
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just open up the submission form on Učilnica, and you'll be able just to post the link as a text or as a link, so you don't have to actually export anything and upload it to Učilnica because it's kind of, redundant.
But now the view is still.
Yeah, because I haven't opened it up yet. I think it's invisible at the moment. I'll adjust it right now. The link is hidden at the moment. How did you manage to get to the link? The link for submission is hidden. Should be hidden. Yeah, that one's hidden. Oh, it's in the previous week. Sorry. Yeah. This year we have a bit of a change in terms of individual weeks. And
date is from last year.
yeah, it shouldn't be even visible. Because we're in the second week from 11th of December, because I think there's an issue with weeks because they should be changed to each year's calendar at the beginning of the subject. But at the moment, I'm not exactly sure whether I'm like really sure what's going to happen if I try and do this at this time. Yeah. For the interviews, like until next week. Yeah. So that we can progress during next week. We can progress with the knowledge you've gathered and go further on. There we go. So now there's a Figma link upload submission page for the interviews. And just upload the link. You don't need to upload any additional materials, no exports from Figma, because it's kind of redundant for me to check it on Učilnica and then go and check it on Figma. Yeah. I opened up a new one. The last one shouldn't be seen, but it was seen in the previous week.
I saved this page.
Yeah, sure.
And opened this in my Figma.
Okay.
And now I am typing just here or I have to create another page?
No, you can provide a text box next to that if you want to. Like, it's your workspace. The point is that you have certain questions you went through with your colleagues within the group, and then interview a few people, like 2 people from your target audience, figure out what works and what doesn't. And next week we'll also briefly discuss the individual questions you've chosen, because it turns out that you might have to reiterate that because you maybe didn't ask the correct questions in terms of what you are pursuing as your idea and so on.
Does every answer that we get, we also put tag here?
Yeah, just write it down next to it. Like, just it's a text box. It's a freestyle text. Don't worry about the form. Worry about the content.
Interview also till next week.
Yeah. Just ask people, not for your own group, but maybe ask people you know, maybe target audience, maybe figure out based on your own experience from maybe your own hometown, and ask your colleagues if they are the target audience. Okay?
And these workshops will be each
Yeah.
week, and
Yeah.
then we also have these labs if we want to do.
If you have any individual questions within the group, yeah, you can come to other lab sessions on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, I think. Like, all of them are listed on Urnik, on the schedule. So we can come to any of those, and we can discuss individual issues, challenges, maybe brainstorm ideas, and so on. And if you have any additional questions, you can always write on Discord server or an email or whatever kind of communications you like. And the idea is that we can go together through this to get to the final product, and maybe retain a certain level of feedback each week, not only just providing the final thing. So we are slowly finishing our live stream for those who are still online with us. Thanks for joining us. Okay, thank you for joining us live. The recording will be made available on YouTube, I think on this link or a similar link. You can always check on Free Studio channel. And see you next week here at 1 o'clock in PR9. Thank you. Bye.